Thank you for having me. My name is Deanne Miller. Thank you. It is truly an honor for me to be in this space. I first came into Unity in this wonderful space in 2015, and I have loved it ever since. I don't know what to tell you. Y'all know that this is some good stuff, right? So really, really grateful for this theology that is very broad and inclusive and encompassing. And for those of you this matters to, happy Pride. Agape International sings one of my absolute favorite songs. And when I say a favorite song, I mean that for a phase of my development, I've probably utilized this song as a stabilizer because the words were so true and hit just right to where it was probably able to really help me excavate something that was really difficult at that time. And so I work with song, I work with prayer, I allow them to take root in me. I allow myself to be offended by them, and then I let God get me together. You know what I'm saying? For those of us who understand that prayer is a very active, participatory reality where, I grew up in a space where on occasion the minister would say, leave your problems, leave your troubles at the door and come on in and worship God. Well, I never understood that. That doesn't make sense to me. If God was supposed to be potent and powerful in the assembly, why can I not bring that with me and have the God of my understanding do something with that? So I don't believe in leaving any of ourselves behind in our spiritual experience. I believe that we need to bring all of who we are, anything in shadow, anything that we think might be in shadow, the stuff that we've pulled out of shadow. We want to be integrated people. We want to have lives that we live well into. We want to leave here with no regrets. So bring it all, okay? So one of my favorite songs is a beautiful song, and these are the words. It's called When the River's Rising. I was inside your soul the day that you appeared. My love contains your heart, but will you remember me? This earth you walk upon, it's holy. The breath you breathe is mine. I'm loving you. Oh, but will you remember me? When the river rises and the seas are not calm, and the peace you felt on yesterday, today is nowhere to be found, and you pray to be free and for the burdens to subside. Let me tell you, hold on. Hold on. I am the answer. Pray till you realize. I was inside your soul the day that you appeared, my love. So when I was asked to speak on One Presence, One Power, it took me right to that space of deep gratitude that comes with it a felt sense of being imbued with the reality of this process. Do y'all know what I mean when I say process? How many of y'all been through some processes? How many people have had to have God really get you together? Okay, I'm not alone. I'm in good company. Wonderful. Because I learned early on in my journey, my personal journey, give you a little bit about me, and I'm going to come back to the message. I was in school down in West Palm Beach College, finishing my undergrad. My mother passed away semester before I graduated from college. A lot of stuff there. Long story, fast forward. Came up here, I want to say it was January the 17th maybe of 1996, and started my career, started at a group home. Very long story there. Didn't really want to do that. It was the best thing for me because I grew probably more than they did. Learning to love out of source deposit. That's how I call it. When we don't have it, Spirit has it for us if we would yield ourselves to it. And that lesson has been a steadfast foundation for me my whole life. And during that period of time, I learned that even in the midst of me sometimes publicly, sometimes privately, coming undone. Spirit was very much there to help me. Charles Fillmore talks about an aggregate of personalities, right? This is way before we knew about parts work and all that stuff. He talks about an aggregate of personalities, and I laughed when I read it because even he understood somehow that we have different parts of us that respond to different ways at different times about things, right? So sometimes people ask, how is it that I can be okay in one arena and not okay in another? Well, that part of you still has some healing to go through, right? Amen. How many of you still have some healing to go? Yes, thank you. Again, I'm in very good company. With that being said, we don't judge that part of ourselves. We integrate it. We put our arms around that woundedness and we draw that right on in because we don't have to leave nothing at the door. Amen. Nothing gets left. All parts are welcome. And the reason we're heightened is because something happened. There's a history there, okay? That's where we include compassion. Okay? Rich compassion. If I observe somebody acting up, I have been alive, thankfully, long enough. I turned 50 last year, y'all. I don't know how this happened. I have been alive long enough to go, something's going on there, okay? And what you want to do, if it's safe, you want to draw them in or meet them where they are, right? Because if we can do that, if it's not, toxic, whatever that means to you, maybe we can share some of the abundant love that we have been given. And maybe we can call them into themselves instead of calling them out. How about that? What would it feel like if we could call in based on a foundation of understanding that we have so much overflow that we can wrap our spiritual arms around someone and call them in? I like that. One presence, one power, who had the first word and will have the last in all of my affairs. God, the good, omnipotent. First slide, please. I'm going to read it out loud. What would a God for grown-ups be? First, one that meets us where we are and welcomes our questioning, growing, changing, and doubting. The idea that God is made in humans' image is usually leveled as a criticism of religion, but what else could God be, right? Our human minds cannot conceive of all that is, cannot encompass a universe of spiritual laws and dimensions that we only guess about. Our world religions are but feeble attempts to describe our varied experience of the unknown. God is understood as best we can, and we need a growing, malleable image of God that expands with each spiritual insight we glean. And this is from a wonderful text by Reverend Ellen Davenport, The 5 Unity Principles. If you have not gotten it, please do get it. It is beautiful and wonderful and deep, and rereading it will only help you to feel more expansive. But the principle that we're talking about is allowing Spirit to continue to roll out things in us, to contact different parts of that aggregated personality set that we have to help us to see through a different prism. How many people are down for that? I love it. When I learned and when I continue to realize that I don't have to try to figure things out alone, I realize, and I hope you realize too, that sometimes things just come up when we're ready to allow. Makes sense? This is why unity is so big on mainly meditation and prayer as well, but definitely meditation. It's like, honey, sit down somewhere and listen, right? It doesn't have to be this thing that we go back and forth about. And if we really are doing that, we may find ourselves to be out of order. And nobody wants to be out of order. That's messy, right? Nobody needs messy. People deserve not messy. So, whatever that malcontent thing is that happens, Spirit's also got an answer for that. I often think about the allegory of Job. It's not historical, y'all. The allegory of Job, and I think about how he had like 7 friends that allegedly came to him, and they all had different perspectives of what he was going through. And they all wanted to tell him what to do, what he should be doing. They all wanted him to see that somehow he had messed up in some kind of way, that God, God can't be questioned. God is just. This is happening for some reason we don't know about, but it's your fault. And I just know if they just would have hushed and just came and sat next to him in a loving, expansive way, that book would have been shorter. Plus, allegorical Job would have had an opportunity to go within himself and do some work and just to pour out his pain with listening ears in a space that will allow for belonging. Does that make sense? Belonging doesn't always happen when things are going on well. Sometimes belonging happens when someone is not well, but they're in good company. That one presence, one power calling us back to ourselves, calling us in because there is more than enough. By people who understand how to not function according to scarcity principles. Amen? Y'all hear that? Okay? If we allow ourselves to work a passage, a song, a message, and we let that thing really take up residence in us in a rich way, we are going to naturally have overflow. And that overflow is needed in the world because people get sideswiped all the time, right? It happens. Can't run from it. You can't be so careful enough that people don't swipe you. Sometimes they just kind of nick us, right? But when we come into a space like this, a community that is grounded in principle, who is living according to higher realities, we can get our hearts massaged because that one presence and one power is operating through each person. And we can just circumvent the messy route altogether, and I like that. Slide number 2. Second, God for grown-ups has to be more than Santa Claus. The ground of all being surely is not making a list of who's naughty or nice and arranging eternal reward or punishment for each. This God is the creative force behind sweeping galaxies. God, that's beautiful. And infinitesimal life forms of bewildering fractal patterns and perfect seasonal cycles of mind-blowing beauty and pure potential. The oak tree and the acorn, the child in a microscopic twist of DNA. God for grown-ups is far outside the human pattern of thinking. And I love that because I see unity as being a delightful disruptor of weird things that we probably learned before we got here. Right? I grew up a combination with United Methodism. That was my family church. And then my mother went seeking. And so from the time I was 5 to 11, we would visit different charismatic spaces. I've seen a lot. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So with that being said, unity shines a light on, wow, like God is just so much bigger than any box we will place God in. But the beautiful thing is, because we're individualized expressions of the divine, that gives us the opportunity to commingle with others to see what expression God has created and imbued them with. And then when we have a cross-pollination effect, so to speak, we just get richer and more abundant. And we're a delightful representation of the world. What would it be like to consider the vastness of God when you're going through something that feels bigger than you? Because no matter how big it feels, Spirit is still more expansive. And I love that. Here's one of my favorite verses, and I love it so much. It's from the version of the Christian scriptures called The Voice. And this is found in John 1 through 5. And it says, "Before time itself was measured, the voice was speaking. The voice was and is God. The celestial word remained ever present with the Creator. His speech shaped the entire cosmos. Immersed in the practice of creating, all things that exist were birthed through him. His breath filled all things with a living, breathing light. A light that thrives in the depths of darkness, blazes through murky bottoms. It cannot and will not be quenched. And because of that, I know for a fact, as you do, beloveds, we've hit some murky bottoms. Some stuff has looked greatly bleak. It's been ugly. And when we tap into Source, as Source is willing to continually reveal itself, we're able to see things in a new way, in a way that restores our self-perception and ennobles us. It reminds us of who we are and that we are yet becoming, and we need that. Some people worry about dying. My thought on that is, where were you before you were here? Somehow we were in the expansiveness that is God. I don't know where I was. I don't have any memory of it. Bless you for whoever has done past life regressions. That's awesome, but still you're not necessarily living in every moment of that remembrance, right? So wherever we were before, I believe we're going back there, and it is all well. It is all fine. And if you and I meditate and hold space for the expansive realness, the fineness that God is, even in spite of all the things that are going on, it doesn't change that undercurrent, that flow of Spirit's goodness. When we allow ourselves to steep into that, we can sideline a lot of things that are going on that feel distasteful. One presence, one power, who's had the first word and will have the last in all of our affairs. God the good, omnipotent. And slide 3, please. Third, most people want to believe that God is involved in their lives. Humans have always intuited a presence they could not see, a silent source of guidance, wisdom, and support, even love, and have sought throughout history to connect with this power. I love this, and I'm going to read this to you. Reverend Ellen, in her book, she quotes the Bhagavad Gita. I just found this to be beautiful. And it just, again, represents that in unity, we believe God is principle and that we are individualized expression of that principle, and we're all it. It is all that is. By me is this entire universe pervaded. All things are made by me, and I in them. Know that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests in the sky, all created beings rest in me. Aren't y'all glad about that? I am the father, the mother, the supporter, and the grandshire of the universe. One presence, one power, having the first word and the last in all of our affairs. I think that when we steep ourselves in the reality of ever-existing presence and we make it a practice, and there's so many practices, whatever practices are feeding you now, go deep. Continue to go deep in those things because it affects how we engage one another. It affects those things that we even feel at times maybe even aggressed by. It allows us to have a shield that buffers us from absorbing all the thorns of the whatever. It makes it irrelevant. And I love that feeling when it's almost like a metacognitive feeling, like, you know, when you meditate, there's that place where the shift happens and you're just kind of like, oh my goodness. Okay, that place, and then you're acting as an observer of the thoughts that you have, but you're not necessarily possessing them, and you realize, oh, this is just coming up, but I'm not attached to it. It's that space, that powerful space where we recognize what we're being held by and that it is good. I advocate for a more somatic spirituality. I think we need to just really feel presence more. Does that make sense? it will correct a lot of things. It will redirect a lot of things. It will help us to see whatever the things that really beset us. It will help us to see it differently. I'd like for you to watch a short clip. And then in closing, I'm going to say a few things to you, but I'd like for you to just kind of roll over the principles that you hear in it, and then we're going to have a little powwow on that. But I want you to keep this in mind, that even though Spirit does not seem to be doing all the things that we want done or that we demand be done, so interesting how we do that. We're just human, trying to figure it out. The truth is that sometimes all we really do need is love, because love leaves a mark. Watch this. I apologize to those who are watching this video who are not able to see that. We will endeavor to put the link to the video when it's posted, so thank you. For those of you who have parts that are hurting, parts that are questioning, parts that are just undone, you are in most excellent company. If you are willing, bring it all into that space with Spirit and some trusted folks and pour it out. We don't get answers a lot of the time. But what I do know is I've found it to be true in multiple life circumstances is that when I was willing to allow love to leave a mark, it made the difference. It made the difference in how I carried the thing, how the thing affected me, how I chose to keep my mouth closed at times, how I chose my words carefully when I felt like I needed to speak. Because when love leaves a mark in a particular area of struggle, we're never the same. We're never the same again. You can't unknow it once you know it. Okay? I can't tell you what your absolutes are. Okay? Or nobody should really be telling anybody that anyway, in my opinion. Nor can I tell you what they ought to be. But what I can tell you is the story that I tell myself is that the Creator who made the stars in the sky also somehow saw it fit for a me to exist. And when I lie on that power which is greater than me, I am restored to love and sanity. I can tell you that because I know that like I know my name.